Hotel workers, what is your craziest story? Former hotel manager here. One time I was checking someone in, and they wanted a reduced rate. Now, we had discounts for AAA, AARP, veteran, etc. I just had to see proof of something. So, I respectfully ask if he had his membership cards for anything. He then starts yelling, saying how I have the mother F power to just put it in the system. Then he spits on me, yes during COVID, and pulls a gun on me. Next thing I know, he gets tackled from behind because one of my weekly regulars just walked in who worked in the police station. Not 100% sure what he did, but he did have to travel a lot between precincts. That guy saved my life. I was working in a pretty fancy hotel, international guests. One morning I was walking down a hallway with a room attendant's trolley and a guest comes to me trying to explain something, but we didn't speak the same language, making it awkward. So eventually he gestures me to come to his room. So we go and I follow him to the bathroom. I notice the smell immediately while he points at his toilet, and when I look there is just this massive turd there. He's still kinda talking to me in his language, but I don't understand his point. And finally he presses the button to flush. The toilet flushes. His turd leaves our company and he looks at me with such a weird proud expression. I just smiled, put 2 thumbs up and left. My family owned a budget hotel in Thailand back in the 90s and early 2000s. Some dude from my country, Norway, came there on holiday with his son who was about 8 years old. The guy was a total pisshead and got mega drunk every night with his kid in tow. He drank up all of the money they had with them. My mother felt sorry for the kid and after talking to his family in Norway lent him some money on the promise that they were going to transfer to her account back home. The same day he got the money he went out at night as usual, but this time alone. Told the people in the reception that the kid is reading some magazines and going to sleep. He came back later with some ladyboy in tow and took her to his room. Fucked her and made some other guests complain about the noise. Screaming and moaning all night. Almost at noon the day after, the guy and the kid came down to eat and the kid was drowsy and tired. My mom was there and was really worried about him, and after putting 2 and 2 together it turned out the guy drugged his kid. My mother told the guy that she was calling the cops if he didn't tell her what he gave the kid. Found out he gave him 2 by 10 milligrams of Valium and almost killed him by overdose. We had a copy of his passport, so my mom contacted the CPS in Norway. His parents too. His mother was furious about the drugging of the kid. Oh, and also told her about the ladyboy too. Don't know what happened to him when he came home, but sure hope he wasn't allowed to have his kid alone anymore. Worked at the front desk of a hotel on an army base. One woman wanted something that I couldn't do for her and she was a total bitch to me. She kept bullying me relentlessly and I was the only person in staff at night. On checkout she handed me a gift-wrapped box and sort of apologized. It was a sterling silver ice bucket. Pretty impractical. I gave it away because I didn't want to be reminded of her. My friend used to work at a hotel and he said one day a famous artist was there with a guy, and when they left, the room had shit all over it. The walls, the bed, everything had shit marks on greater than, less than. Worked in a restaurant that was part of a hotel, so I guess this kind of counts. Had a sommelier, wine expert, who worked in our restaurant, 50s, couple of kids, divorced, living in a ski town for the past 15 years. One night a guest came in, and over the course of about 2 hours, ordered around $6 worth of wine. He bought 3 $2,000 bottles. Not totally unheard of in our fine dining restaurant. But not common either. Our sommelier sat down and drank all of it with him, getting absolutely hammered drunk, while running up a huge food tab. Again, not uncommon for the somm to have a glass of wine. But not 3 bottles. Overall bill was around $8,000 with tip. And my manager was stoked on the big sale. About an hour later, he's flipping out. Our somm left with the guy to go get his credit card at the hotel and never came back. Manager has one of our bussers track the somm down. Turns out the guest was a disgraced exec who was in a massive amount of debt and couldn't pay the bill. When the somm found out, he was too embarrassed to come back and face the music. Our manager fired him. About 6 months later a friend of my girlfriend went up to visit my old somm at his cabin. The guy had shot himself. Ski towns are fun. But boy, they are depressing places. During COVID, a couple, let's call him Bob, who were staying at the hotel for a few days, was threatening to stab multiple people that ranged from guests to staff. He didn't pay for the next day and so the staff asked him to leave. But instead he acted like a huge boss and the government allowed it. If you can't pay you can't stay. Called the cops. And it turns out Bob had warrants but the cop can't actually arrest him. Bob stated the latter also. So the cop and I came to an agreement that my staff will move his stuff out while the cop went to process him and or drive around. No jailing during lockdowns. I thought great. Simple plan, simple execution. They're heading towards the police department to do that, which should give us more than 30 minutes. We get a call from the WA State AG telling us we weren't allowed to take his stuff out or else there will be huge consequences which could result in me being jailed. I thought WTF lol, they couldn't even jail this guy and he has actual warrants. When the call ended, the cop car immediately returned tilde 10 minutes. The cop and the AG told the guy he can stay for the night but had to leave tomorrow. When Bob got back to his room he was pissed to find half of his shit was outside. After talking to him, he agreed to leave tomorrow, obviously expecting some destruction. This all occurred around noon. I told the staff to go home and I had to watch this guy and his room for his stay duration. If he tries to do anything to anybody I will eject him from the world myself, was my thought process at the time. Next day came and he left at checkout time. The room was completely destroyed, and I had to throw everything out and remodel the room. Everything was broken. A fridge, microwave, beds, TV, shower curtain/head. The towels were in the toilets at an attempt to clog. The phone broken and its landline ripped from the wall. The windows were broken, the walls had holes in it. Carpet ripped, wood flooring scratched, and the sprinkle on top was everything in his fridge was scattered everywhere including smeared on the walls. This only comes out of the hotel's pockets, not the state AG or Bob. The most damaging thing was my faith in the system is completely gone. Ironically, a few months later we get a call from an apartment complex. Turns out Bob used us as a recommendation. What a fucking idiot. Bob is vastly smaller than me and I could have dropped him easily. Sometimes I wonder about that route. TL, doctor, the lockdown was a mistake. I used to work front desk at a hotel. I would get sexually harassed almost every day. I know item's the craziest, but it's crazy compared to my normal WFH job. I had one regular who would try to flirt with me and get me to bring things up to his room. I told my good manager about this, and the next time the guest asked me to bring up a towel to his room, the manager went instead of me. The guest was waiting naked in his room. Another time I had a different guest, a long stay contract with multiple guys staying together, who seemed like a nice shy guy who I think liked me. His other friends tried to trick me into going into an elevator with just me and him, and I only used the stairs after that. Other drunk people would openly say they wanted to have sex with me no matter what, and I had to lock myself in our office until my managers came to help me. It was the absolute worst job. Oh Lord, where do I begin? 1. One resort I worked for had a guest order ice cream from room service. I don't recall exactly what happened, but the guest was pissed about something with the order, and proceeded to deliberately dump the ice cream out of the bowl onto the floor and told the attendant it was his job to clean it up. When he went to get a towel from the cart, she blocked the door and told him he couldn't leave until he cleaned up the mess she made. Poor guy used the sleeve of his uniform shirt to do what he could. The following morning, the guest was invited to the resort manager's office where she was told that she was no longer welcome at the resort for the remainder of her stay and would not be welcomed back in the future under any circumstances. 2. Booked a group of high rollers from a well-known casino hotel in Vegas once. One evening they went into town for a night out. About an hour after arriving back to the resort, a group of ladies who could best be described as entertainers showed up at the security gate, claiming they were invited to visit the group. Turns out to be true, so they were allowed to stay. 3. A colleague was at the porte cochere late one evening, when a female guest came running up in nothing but a teddy, hysterical and bleeding copiously from a head wound. She got into a fight with her boyfriend who then threw her off a second-floor balcony. 4. During a rehearsal dinner, the mother of the groom got into a fight with her husband. She was totally shit-faced, and started to beat the poor guy with her high-heel sandal. My friend was the conference services manager handling the event, and he literally had to carry her to a golf cart to go back to her room, and then carry her from the cart into the room, while her husband apologized profusely. 5. Finally, my personal favorite, we received a guest complaint about noise by one of our pools. Come to find out that a woman staying in a suite near the pool was locked out on her patio and was screaming/pounding on the sliding glass door. Room's director and head of security go to the suite, and find a man sitting on the sofa calmly watching TV. The two of them had gotten into a fight and he deliberately locked her out on the patio. The best part though, was the final line on the guest incident report. Mr. and Mrs. X are celebrating their honeymoon and will be with us for 3 more nights. I had a guest who was staying on the first floor of our hotel. His window faced the front parking lot near the main entrance. Around 10:30 p.m., an angry mother came to the front desk to notify me that this guest was jerking off to porn and could be seen from the parking lot. I couldn't believe it, so I went outside to check and immediately regretted that decision. I tried knocking on the guy's window to get his attention, but he just took one look at me and went back to it. So, I called the private security firm that manages our hotel, and they detained the guy until the actual cops showed up. Damn. I was hoping I would find the story from the front desk person who saw my drunk ass strip naked in the lobby and proceed to pass out in the hot tub of a hotel that was not mine. A guy mistakenly thought his wife was in a room with another man. He was also really high, and tried to break into the room. The guest in the room didn't know him, and warned him that he was armed and would shoot. The guy still tried to get in though, and grabbed a fire extinguisher and used it to break the window. The guest shot him. Guy was shot in the hip but was otherwise okay. Another time, a guy I went to high school with came to check out. It was weird because we were several states away from where we went to high school, but not too weird because we were in a military town. Anyway, I'm nosy and I got bored later on, so I looked him up on Facebook. He was married, and the girl that was with him at checkout was absolutely not his wife. White dude, 6'3", long gross dreadlocks and a Rasputin beard, black gunky fingernails like a fairy tale witch. He was all greasy and covered in what looked like soot. But hey, he had an ID and a valid matching credit card, so I said sure, I'll check you in. Don't judge a book by its cover. This man dragged in a military duffel bag and went to his room. Our desk was directly adjacent to the elevator with the doors just to our right, so we see everyone who comes and goes. Dude comes down about every 20 minutes to have a cigarette, walk out our front doors, and we have smoking stations on either side of the door. You know those little sand pits for cig butts? Dude lights a cig, takes a drag, gently sets it down in the sand, walks over to the other side of the door, lights another, drags it, sets that one down, proceeds to walk back and forth dragging only once at each cig before returning to the other. Goes on like this for about 10 minutes. Maybe he lit some more, cause I feel like 2 cigs won't last you 10 minutes at the rate he was going. Anyways, then he goes back to his room and comes back 20 minutes later and does it again. And again all afternoon. Guy comes out once more around 5 p.m. and just blankly stares through the doors at the desk agents while he does his ritual. Then he just walks off, disappears, never comes back. Now I'm curious, so I go up with security to see if he destroyed the room. We open the door and immediately get a blast with the smell of bleach. The duffel bag he took up was on the bed. The bag was filled with like plastic Walmart bags. About 12 of them all tied up tight but filled with clothes literally soaking in bleach. Then we started to notice all these post-it notes all over the place. Tons of them. Like more than 100. Tucked in the corner of mirrors and picture frames and under the bed and taped all up inside the bathroom. All folded up. Naturally we open a few to see what they contain. I'd give this is some Magic the Gathering lingo or Dungeons and Dragons talk, but they all said like, +6 sword damage, 3 mana, +2 intelligence, and my personal favorite, x10 power to the 4th mage. So we took to calling this dude the 4th mage. Guy never came back for his murder clothes or whatever the hell his bleach-soaked menagerie of t-shirts was about. Anyways, if you ever see the 4th mage in the Midwest, tell him he forgot his bag in Minnesota. Cleaning rooms one summer. Entered checkout guest's bathroom and noticed rolled up towels on the floor. Pretty common. I start picking them up, hidden underneath pile of human shit. I open the shower curtain as I begin to smell an overpowering stench of shit. I find at least 10 dumps in the shower, mixed with piss. The toilet, clean as fuck, doesn't look like it was even used. I quit that day. I used to work in a hotel, and there's probably a dozen stories at least that come to mind. But the craziest one is probably the couple that called down to the front desk and requested our softest tongs from the kitchen, because they'd been intimate, and gotten a condom stuck inside the girlfriend and couldn't get it out. Other than the dead bodies, someone hung a bunch of condoms and underwear from a ceiling fan once. Where do I start? I've got 13 years of hotel stories ranging from the kinky, illegal, disgusting, and heartbreaking, to the baffling, hilarious and embarrassing. The big one that springs to mind is in 2006, a guy that shot his wife and little girl in their home, who then fled to the UK and checked into my hotel. It was me that checked him in, but obviously I was totally unaware of it until the police came to ask me some questions. It left me with the weirdest, saddest feeling knowing that this seemingly normal and pleasantly mannered guy who I checked in and was chatting with like any other guest had just murdered his wife and young daughter 24 hours previously and was acting completely normal. That feeling has never left me all these years later. Neil Entwistle was his name, and I believe he was taken back to the US and is in prison now. Worked as a furniture mover for a month in a hotel. The storehouse tended to have girls that worked at the hotel crying there. 1. A manager let her younger siblings party in a room and one of them threw a chair at a floor-to-ceiling glass window and cracked it. Had to be replaced with a ton of special equipment because it was 12 plus stories up. Insane costs involved. 2. Crackhead high on crack thought the fire sprinkler was a spider. Proceeded to break it and flood about half the hotel below his room. He actually came back to the hotel later to gamble more. 3. More crackheads getting high on crack and one of them odds. They just rolled him out into the hallway to die. 4. We had a weird regular that would harass the front desk women for photos together, and always chat them up like crazy. I was called up to help with a laptop issue. He didn't know how to burn a CD of music that he was going to gift to the front desk. As I'm walking out of the room I pause at the doorway, which has a bathroom right there. In the bathroom there happens to be a small dolly cart with a car battery, with battery cables going to the sink. I told management I didn't want to help that guest anymore lol. Not necessarily crazy but my favorite. I worked as a housekeeper in a hotel that had a very large and diverse staff. There were people from Haiti, Japan, Mexico, Russia, and many more. Just think all over the world. There was a very kind Japanese man who I worked with who did not speak a lot of English. But he was very kind and always in a good mood. I noticed he had sort of a seemingly buddy-buddy relationship with another man we worked with. This man was Haitian, and also spoke very little English. I never heard them talk to each other but I would always walk in when they were laughing and dispersing. One day, I had the pleasure of witnessing them interact. I was refilling my housekeeping cart when the Japanese man walked into the room to access the elevator. The Haitian man looked up at him with a huge smile and he said yup. The Japanese man replied yup. And pressed the elevator button. The Haitian man replied, once again yup. This went back and forth for about a minute before the doors opened and shut on the elevator. Another day I walked in and I witnessed the end of the interaction. I realized they did this every day. This is when I learned a simple yup transcends language barriers. It was the only word they needed to know, and the only one they needed to say. This is a story I've told many times over the years. I was working a 12-hour overnight shift when I answered a call from someone asking if we had any jacuzzi suites available for the night. It was a fairly slow night and we had plenty of rooms available. I confirmed that we had several jacuzzi suites open. The guy on the phone requested to reserve one as far from any other guests as possible. There were no guests on the third floor so I reserved one there and let him know we could hold it until midnight. About 2 hours later a white van pulled under the front awning and a guy got out and started removing expensive camera equipment from the back, plus sound equipment and lighting equipment. The driver parked the van in a parking space then came inside to handle the room. I gave him the key cards and told him there were no other guests on the floor. I pointed him to the elevator. He gave a key card to the other guy who started taking equipment up. A few minutes later, 2 women arrived and they grabbed equipment and they all went up together. Maybe an hour later I answered a call and they said they needed lots of towels. By that time, I was alone at the front desk, so I had to close it down to get towels from housekeeping to take up to them. I grabbed a cart and a stack of towels and headed to the elevator to the third floor. I knocked and identified myself. They opened the door and I wheeled the cart in with the towels. They had all the equipment set up and were getting ready to shoot what was clearly a porn movie. The guy who let me into the room thanked me for the prompt service and introduced me to the other 3, and said I could stay and watch if I wanted to. Since I had closed the front desk and had a phone on me if anyone needed anything, I said I could watch for a little bit. The guys handled camera and sound while one of the women did a solo masturbation scene in the jacuzzi. I have to admit it was hot to watch, but I found myself more interested in the production side of the business since I had never seen that before. The whole thing was done quite professionally and they left the room spotless when they were done. I was impressed to see how something we generally take for granted and would think would be done in a sleazy manner was done as a business. Ian McKellen wanted the main lounge door closed because of the noise and I had to be the one to tell him it wasn't allowed. I felt horrible. So I was working at a Colorado hotel and guess who would come through the door? No other than my hero Kobe Bryant. It showed true Mamba mentality that night. Arguably the number one rule at any hotel front desk is to not give out room keys without verifying ID. The reality is that throughout the industry it's pretty common to use your best judgment and provide a key, so long as the guest can at least verify some information on the reservation, address, phone number, etc., if they don't have their ID on them. This wasn't at my hotel but one my dad worked at. Guy comes up to the front desk and manages to get a key to a room under his wife's name. He goes up to find his wife and the man she's having an affair with. Husband murders both of them then kills himself. Years later I still think about the front desk clerk who gave him that key. I became an absolute hardass after that and never gave out another key without complete verification. I posted this a long while back, but it still holds true. So sorry that I appear late to the party. Hotel manager here for a 5-diamond hotel/resort that commonly appears in magazines around the world. We just had the most fucked up wedding in our history. The bride is a tiny little thing. Beautiful, Korean, and has a hot sister to boot. Score. The groom comes from old money. White, tall, dark and handsome. I was amazed they waited the 8 months to get married at our facility the way they were all over each other before the wedding during the site tour. Flash forward to the wedding. Wonderful ceremony. Spared no expense. They even forked up the additional $10K for a fireworks show. During the reception everyone was customarily drunk and now it was time for the toasts. Everyone gets up and says their piece to polite applause. Then the father of the groom gets up and everyone has such a happy expression on their face as his is the last on what was supposed to have been only 15 minutes of speeches. The father of the groom starts off with, "Our family comes from 15 generations of Virginians who even fought in the War of Northern Aggression. What die-hard Southerners call the American Civil War. And now instead of marrying a girl of Dixie, he goes out and marries a Korean chink. This speech continues in this fashion for 10 minutes till a groomsman gets out of his chair and unplugs the microphone. The English/Korean translator stopped translating long ago and girls are crying in the audience. The father of the groom noticed that the mic was not working any longer, drops it on the ground, then starts shouting, "It looks like my microphone is no longer working, so I'll just start speaking a little louder." The bride and groom walked out of their own wedding.